Welcome to another episode of B2B Startup Growth. I'm Sean McHouse, and in this podcast, I aim to share with you wisdom from some of the smartest B2B startup leaders and professionals that I know. We talk about all aspects of marketing, sales, growth hacking, life hacking, and everything in between. Okay. Hi, Eytan.
Hi. Thanks for having me here. Really excited.
So it's so good to have you here. And today is April 5th, right? We're recording this April 5th in Israel, which in Israel, we're about a month into the Corona realization.
Yeah, I kind of feel like dates don't matter anymore, right? It's just all holed up in a basement somewhere working, but yeah.
Well, I think that in the episodes that I've recorded since this whole world has changed, it's important for me to say that when we're recording this, because people, when they listen, they need to have the context of when we're talking about this.
Yes, context matters.
Okay. So before we jump into our topic, please introduce yourself, Eytan. First, maybe a little bit about your company, and then tell us how you got to be the CMO of Freightos.
Sure. So Freightos is a logistics technology company. As a marketer, I tend to struggle with this just because you say the word logistics and people basically fall asleep. But in general, and I think now more than ever in Corona, people realize how important this is, right? The sector, before I even say what we do, you realize how connected the world is and how important it is for things to move from A to B. And most large companies have realized this, right? Amazon is basically a company that deals with e-commerce, data, and logistics. Alibaba is the same. And in high tech, we tend to prioritize, kind of software about moving bits and bytes around the world. But the truth is that somebody needs to move those physical goods around the world. And that's kind of where Freightos comes in. The Freightos vision is to make global trade really, really easy. So to make it easy for any company to move anything from A to B. And the way we wanted to accomplish that is by creating an online freight marketplace. So basically think Expedia or Ctrip if you're in Asia for international freight, where if you're a small business or a mid-sized business owner, you could log in, instantly compare prices from different companies, and then book and manage those shipments. The one twist on this is that in order to build a marketplace, in order to have sellers and buyers kind of transacting online, first you need to have automated sellers, right? The logistics companies, whether it's UPS or FedEx or very large companies that most people don't know, like Panalpina or DB Schenker, that move over half of the world's goods, you need to automate those companies first so that they could sell online. So about 7.5 years ago, Freightos started to raise money, and we went to market by building SaaS software for logistics companies. Right? Instead of going straight to the marketplace, we started selling software to logistics companies to help them automate their pricing and help them automate the way that they sell freight services. And it really hit this product market fit where the companies knew that they needed it. So within a couple of years, we hit close to 50% market share across the top 100 global freight companies. And that kind of set us up in 2016 to launch our marketplace. And today we're the world's largest freight marketplace. We have partnerships with FedEx, with Alibaba, and we work with the largest companies that are importing and exporting to help over 200,000 companies that have signed up on our platform to get better insights and visibility into logistics. So that's what Freightos does. We really help the logistics companies and we help importers and exporters do what they do much easier with much more transparency.
Wow, that's very impressive and very important. And maybe today even more than a month ago? Do you see that?
Totally. We flip-flopping back and forth between we can't move things, right? The ships, when Corona first started, ports in China were just dying out, right? Like they just were not moving at all because the trucks couldn't move around inside of China to get to the ports. And then 2 weeks ago, when President Trump stopped all flights from Europe to the United States, we don't think about this, but when we sit on an airplane, the entire belly under our seats is where all the cargo moves. And that's about 60% of the imports to the United States by air go on those same passenger jets. So there are these rapid fluctuations in supply and demand, which have kept us very, very busy. And I think this is really where software and digitization can shine. It's the fact that digital processes can deal with things so much faster than humans can. And like everything, these crazy situations create these huge amounts of pressure on companies, but also a ton of opportunity if you know how to identify it.
Right. So, Eytan, I'd love to talk to you today about ABM, about account-based marketing. Before I jump into your story in this context, I just want to say that account-based marketing is a term that different companies use in very different ways. Some use this term to refer to actually marketing with segmentation that is very, very specific per account. So it's granular segmentation, but you do marketing as you do to segments, you do to a specific account, a specific company. Others, I hear when they use the term account-based marketing, they actually refer to advertising campaigns that are directed to a list of companies. Others refer to the term when they refer to a set of software features that allow us marketers to track very specifically the activity of specific accounts. So can you, before we jump into the practices that you use, could you please tell me your definition of account-based marketing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how often we use terms without necessarily trying to come up with the concrete definition of it. On a very high level, I think my definition is, if you go to a trade show, you have a list. When somebody comes in and walks up and says hi to you and hands you your business card, instantly, right? Within a second, is this person the right person for me or not? But there's thousands of other people that are sitting at that trade show or walking through to the trade show. And effectively, you're paying to see them all. But really, you only care about 30, 40, it depends on your sector, maybe 100 people that are going to walk by your booth. And the way I see it is, hey, what if we could just get rid of all the people at the trade show and come up with that list, like that, those 50 companies or 60 companies, and it could be 5 people. If you're initially starting to go to market, right, if you're in MVP stage, you can come up with those list of 10 companies that you think are your dream customers and only go after them, right? You spend zero time going after any other company and you just go full court press on those 10 companies. So for me, it is basically winnowing down who is your exact target market on a firmographics level, on demographics level, even on an individual job title in the appropriate companies, and just going directly after them. And I don't think that, we call it account-based marketing. It's also account-based sales, right? In sales, I think salespeople have been doing this forever. This is, this is their bread and butter. And this is just an evolution of that to the fact that an entire company, really, if they're trying to do something, if they're going after a very specific target market, they can just focus on that specific target market. So I would say account-based marketing is really just target audience-based marketing. It's going after a very, very specific target audience. And the more you can finesse that and the more you can keep it very, very small and very, very neat, the easier it's going to be to make that happen.
Cool. And
that's a very long definition. That's not going to make it to Webster.
Very good. It's on point. Also, it's interesting that you mentioned the context of events, because now one of the biggest issues around the world being under an epidemic is that can't go to events anymore. And so many companies in our situation now are looking to replace the interaction that they used to rely on for events with digital interaction. And account-based marketing is the very, very common way that now companies are starting to tune their marketing activities, their marketing plans by. So I think account-based marketing is now a very interesting topic to study more about if you're not already doing it, right? So why don't we learn a little bit from what you guys are doing? Because obviously you're doing it pretty well.
Yeah, we kind of stumbled into it. I'm going to be very, very honest. And I think that a lot of marketing, I think the two ways to do it, there's like an inductive approach and a deductive approach where you can either try things that work and then get to the right place, or you can just go out, look if there's a playbook, and then try to implement that playbook. And it's really, really hard to implement a playbook because, I think about it like a football playbook, right? You can go out there and you can steal the New England Patriots playbook, but that's built off of very specific personalities from the coaches and from the individual players. And if you don't have Tom Brady on your team, you're not going to be able to take that exact same playbook. It's just not plug and play. So I've always struggled with taking other companies' playbooks, and you could take inspiration, you could try to get to the nut or behind it, but you can't just copy and paste it. And part of this, I'm going to go on a little segue first before we get to the actual answer. A big part of this is shaped by kind of my background before I got to Freightos. I'm not a marketing professional by trade. As a matter of fact, Freightos, I got very lucky. Freightos was the first high-tech company that I officially worked at. My background is in storytelling, is in PR, is in crisis communication and strategic planning. I was in the Israeli military for a long time, for a good 7 years. In my last position, I was the IDF spokesperson to North America. And you kind of understand while you're doing that, the importance of a target audience, right? And of understanding how do I fit the very, very right message with the right data points to the right target audience? Because that's all that matters. Your answer to CNN is not going to be the same answer as Fox. And it certainly won't be the same as your answer to Al Jazeera or your answer, or your answer to Russia Today. So you really need to understand your target audience very, very well. And when I came into Freightos, I was the first marketing hire. We were just an 8 or 9-person company at the time. And obviously, I sit down at my desk the first day. I go on Wikipedia and search for marketing strategy because I just literally have no clue what I'm doing. I don't have a marketing background. And for a while, we just tried. I tried doing what everybody else was talking about, content marketing. Tried to put out stuff. It never really took off. And at a certain point, I was kind of despondent, and I sat down and I said, how can I actually get in front of these people? And I started to talk to a couple of different marketing professionals, and they said trade shows, right? You got to do trade shows. Everybody does trade shows. So we went to a couple of trade shows, and one of the trade shows I remember was a trade show in Dublin. And we went to this trade show. It was a tech trade show, not a logistics one. And we had one of these small turnkey, meter by meter booths, the kind of where you're just standing all day and you're just sad. You're watching everybody go to everybody else's booth. 95% of the people, 99% of the people are not interested. It was worse for us because they walk by us and say logistics, literally fall asleep in the middle of the conversation and then just keep on walking to AR or VR. And it was just not worth our time. So I went back to the hotel that we were at and I sat down and I was like, okay, how do I actually get in front of the people that really, really matter? And that's when I started Googling and I came across this idea of account-based marketing. And I think the penny for us dropped when I sat down and thought, what do I know internally at Freightos better than any other person in our target market? So if I'm trying to sell to VP sales or CEOs at logistics companies, what can I educate to them? Right? What can I educate them with? What value can I add to them? And everything about tech companies right now is value add. How can I be a value add? And it's shifted from needing a product market fit to needing a content market fit. Your content, you're competing with the New York Times, with The Economist, with trade publications. They all know what they're talking about. They write professionally and they can do it for free and they're not biased, right? Or at least officially they're not biased. So you have to sit down and think, as a startup, how can I educate a VP sales at a Fortune 500 logistics company and introduce something new? And that was the challenge.
Is that your persona, the persona that you target, the most important one in your audience? Who is it exactly?
Back then, when we were starting this, it was either a CEO, a head of innovation, or a VP sales or VP global sales at a large logistics company.
So you, as being new in this job, before that, having a lot of experience in PR and spokesmanship, how could you, Eytan, educate a VP of sales at a big logistics company at that stage?
Exactly. And that's why I was...
Solution?
Yeah, I mean, what you're seeing, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but what you're seeing is the result of me pulling out a lot of hair, trying to figure out the exact answer to that question. And when I sat down and I said, what does Freightos actually do? We help these companies automate freight sales because nobody in the industry is actually automated, which means that I actually know a lot more about freight sales automation than any of these companies do. And more than that, the gap that they have is that they want to know usually not what is happening in the industry as a whole, but how do I fit into this and what is my role? So, let's take UPS Global Freight, which wasn't actually a company we were pitching at the time, but I think it's an easier example for most people to swallow. If I'm thinking I need to sell a sales automation solution, a logistics sales automation solution to UPS Global Freight, how do I do that? And the number one thing I was thinking is, okay, a head of global sales there is worried about two things. They're worried about their internal sales. And probably a little bit more than that, they're worried, what are my competitors doing, right? Because that's I'm going to start losing my sales too. And our solution to this was basically to invent 3 fake companies. We built websites, got phone numbers for 3 fake companies. And I say we, this was me, the marketing department, the editorial we. I got 3 fake companies and I literally spent an entire day just reaching out to these random logistics companies, to UPS Global Sales, for using 3 fake names. And said, hey, I'd like to get a freight quote to ship a small package or whatever, a small pallet from China to the United States. And I documented every single aspect of that. Are they responding to me? How long does it take? Is it expensive? Do they have a website form where I can send it in? Do they have automated pricing? And I documented every single aspect of that. And I wrote it up into this like 8 or 9 piece presentation where I basically ranked how well they're doing. And I could come to the head of UPS Global Sales and say, listen, I know how your team is doing when it comes to online sales. And I took that entire document, I kind of blurred out all of the really interesting information. We just went online, found the emails from the 5 or 6 people at the company that really mattered, because cold email outreach with really good content is still the best way to get in front of a new person. And we just emailed them and said, hey, would you like to know how well you guys are doing? We compiled this report. And the response rate it blew our mind. Right? Within a second, if I'd gotten one of those leads at the stupid trade show that I was wasting my time at in Dublin, I would have been a happy man. And instead, I could have just stayed at home, right, in my basement, done this research and sent it out, and it worked. And I think for me, that was the aha moment where I don't need to speak to everybody, and I don't even need to speak to everybody at a specific company. I need to speak to the right person, and I need to bring in the right value with some type of educational content that is also at some point in the very, very distant future by intent, right? That pushes them kind of down the funnel towards being interested in my specific solution. And that was kind of my introduction to the world of like ABM.
I love that. What I'd like to point out here is that I see a lot of companies trying to put together some kind of survey to interest their audience. And I'd love your input on what level of value and detail does it really need to have? Because I see sometimes people try to do it quickly with a few, marketers that try to put something together pretty, something that looks pretty. But of course, what you're describing it in 2 minutes, but it might have taken you a lot of effort to put together something in depth, right? So how much depth do you really need to put into that in order for it to be very valuable in front of your audience?
Right. So I don't think there's an absolute answer to that, right? It's like how deep is a hole. But I think, what I use as the benchmark, right? The golden rule that I ask myself when we put together content is this useful enough that a VP sales or whoever my target persona is will look at this, will read it, and will share it. And that's the level that you need, right? Which means that you don't always need 500 responses to a survey. Sometimes 5 is enough. You don't even always need data. One of my most successful, I think, and this was kind of accidental too, but one of my most successful ABM posts was we were trying to get to a couple of specific companies. I managed to foster this research-based relationship with 3 or 4 people at the target companies that we were trying to get to, who weren't necessarily the people that you'd want to sell to, but were still very, very helpful from a research perspective. And I basically got a couple of them to agree to do interviews about digital transformation and online sales. And I interviewed them, right? This was not a quantitative research. We interviewed them, we put it on the blog, probably took 2 or 3 hours to put together. And if I'm going after, John Smith at company A, and I post an interview with him on LinkedIn and say, I spoke to John Smith at company A, and I tag both of them, and John Smith likes it, all of his followers are going to see what he posted. And if he's a senior person at a company, his followers are probably the employees at the company, which means that even if I don't get any views, the people at that company are still going to see it. And that's why I think you have to ask yourself, like, is this person going to share it internally? Is it good enough? Does it derive enough value that they're going to share it?
But in that example, the person you're targeting was interviewed by you specifically?
So it wasn't the person I was targeting. It was a person who was senior at the company, who was in the general space, but wasn't actually the sales target. So to figure out, okay, well, how can I foster that general brand visibility and also hopefully leapfrog to the right person?
Understood. Wow, that's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, so it works, and it also, just one last add on to that is that the content never lives alone, right? It's not, and some people say content is king, distribution is king. It really needs to be both, and that means that both of them need to be really, really good. So the direction we basically evolved that report where we would analyze a specific company. When we did enough of those companies, we did 15, 20 of them. We said, okay, let's put together an annual state of online freight sales report, and we've done that for 5 or 6 years now. We created good enough relationships where we were driving value to trade reporters, get them to write about it. That automatically drives a ton more people. So every time we put together one of these reports, we'll pick up like 500, 600 qualified leads that will come in. It probably takes us 2 or 3 weeks. And instead of using trade show budgets, which is where this whole thing, whole question kind of arc started from, instead of using trade show budgets, we just let them come to us, assuming that we have the right content and the right distribution channel.
So it always comes back to very simple basics of inbound marketing, right? You put out something really good and useful, and then they want to consume it, and they come to you. That's the simplistic
Totally.
way of looking at it, and it's always true. The thing is that you need to be good enough in the value that you bring to them that it shines beyond all the noise, right?
Yep.
Okay, so tell us more about specifically what are the things you do or you did. If you can tell us about a specific campaign that was constructive, helpful, successful.
Yeah, so my favorite, I have a couple, but I would say one of my favorite is still this annual report that I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
because you start to pick up, you do it once, and once you establish a cadence for these things, it kind of picks up its own brand name. So we would put together this report. I remember it blew my mind just where I started to see the data showing up. So Maersk, which is the world's largest ocean liner, they move over 20% of all global goods. 90% of goods that we consume are shipped by ocean, and Maersk is the largest ocean liner by far. And I saw our data popping up in a U.S. House committee briefing that the head of Maersk in the United States did. I saw our data start popping up in The Economist and started popping up in research papers and all these random places where you realize, like, yes, you managed to bring in value that somebody else hasn't gotten around to, and our distribution channels for that. It's really simple. Like we don't get involved, or we don't use particularly sophisticated ABM tools. We don't do IP range targeting. We don't do a lot of display advertising. We'll take a report like that. We'll post it on our blog. We'll come up with a couple of smaller insights that we have. We'll let people download the PDF. We'll email it out to our existing list of people that have interacted with us in the past. We'll send it out to reporters together with like a very, very easy handout that says this is the basics. And then once we get like a nice little bump from that, we'll start running targeted LinkedIn ads. The targeted LinkedIn ads, as long as you have the right audience, especially in the B2B sector, they're worth their weight in gold. Right? We'll put together a report in the very beginning of the year. By August or September, we'll still be seeing acquisition costs for leads that are sub $40 from C-levels at like top 1,000 companies in our space, because it just keeps on delivering the goods. And then you do it again the next year, and you
The
can start.
report is gated, but it's free. It's free of charge.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, it's gated with the contact details, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and another thing I wanted to understand, you said we customize the report. So do you have a practice of customizing the report per specific account that you're trying to send it to interest in it?
So this, it all started when we were customizing individual reports for companies. Once we did enough, we realized, okay, the real value is in providing, here's what the top 20 companies are doing. And that way I can go on LinkedIn and say, see how your company is doing while, comparing the top 20 companies, and they all download that. And what really makes it easy from a kind of a funnel perspective is you let that person download the report, and the SDR or inside sales that reaches out to the person after they download, instead of saying, hey, let me tell you what my product does, can say, hey, I know you downloaded that report. Would you like to see how your company did specifically compared to everybody else? And that creates this pull, this educational pull that just tracks with exactly what they actually came in to buy, or what they actually came in to consume.
Right. So let me try to generalize what you're saying. So you put together a report that's general about the industry, and then you respond to those who downloaded it specifically with some things customized to them.
Exactly.
Okay, good. All right. So please continue. Send it out. You got specific people interested. You sent them something specific to them. What then?
The handoff at that point is usually to the sales team, right? When you're dealing with enterprise organizations,
right?
When you have the lead, really the sales team are the people that are most qualified to deal with that. And as I think there's always a little bit of healthy tension between sales and marketing. This really works best when sales understands the value of what marketing is doing, and marketing understands the value of what sales is doing, right? Because especially in B2B SaaS, we have a different business unit that is all inbound, low touch. But in SaaS, enterprise SaaS like this, you need a salesperson there. You need that relationship. It takes a long time. There needs to be a very healthy dose of respect in the marketing organization for what sales is doing. And it needs to be on the marketing organization to prove that they're driving enough value that sales will come to you. So, I mean, for me, like my flagship moment is not when a prospect downloads our white paper or downloads some research. It's when a salesperson reaches out to me and says, hey, when are we doing the refresh of X and Y research? I really want to send that out to my customers. And for me, that's worth more than like a C-level
Wow.
lead, because that's scalable. It means that they'll be able to do that with 30, 40 different companies.
Amazing. So I'd like to understand better this handover, because this point I often see as a point of friction in some companies. So can you explain, maybe share with us what happens in Freightos once you hand off the account or the lead to sales? How possessive are they of the process from that point? Do they still want you to continue your nurture once that point happens? In what way are you now aligning the activity that marketing is doing in front of this account versus what sales are doing in front of this account? Can you maybe spell it out in more detail for us?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said it was perfect, right? I think every marriage has its problems. I think
Right.
what actually matters is so far, sales and marketing have stayed together, and we're working on it. So we're very committed to finding a happy relationship. It's different with each salesperson. Typically, there's an understanding that the nurture process brings value. In general, there are two very, very parallel tracks, right? Where on the one hand, they're consuming educational content. On the other hand, they want to get in the nitty gritty technical specs and, contract negotiation. Those two almost exist on two parallel levels. The best way to make that continue to work is to deconflict issues. And this is something that we've learned, of course, the hard way, where from day one, before you even start writing that piece of content, get on the phone with like the sales team and say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. Do you guys have input? Where are you running into issues? As much as, people always talk, and you read like a million blogs about people talking about the importance of customer research. And at the end of the day, I don't think most marketing professionals get on the phone that often and speak to customers.
Can you describe how many people in marketing in Freightos are involved in that piece of content marketing, and how many people in sales need to interact with you on it?
So we'll have about 4 people in the marketing team that are involved in these types of efforts and in the real high-level education, right? And that was actually my second hire at Freightos on the marketing team, was a kind of consultant role rather than marketing, right? Because I knew that our reports need to compete with BCG, McKinsey, and IDC. So I'm not looking for a content writer. I'm looking for somebody who can actually do research, who can run a quick, who VLOOKUP, whatever, they leave that in the past, right? It's really about like running like SQL queries and can actually come up with the right research. So that's the first person. The second person is the person who runs our corporate marketing team. Because a big part of the distribution is, how do I work together with the press? How do I work together with analysts and make sure that this actually gets out to the right people? And then the third person is the person who runs the marketing specifically for the business unit that focuses on B2B SaaS. And that's really the handoff between the sales team. And that's the person who can say, wait a minute, their sales process actually doesn't look like this, right? If I look in our CRM, I see that this is usually where people drop off. And that's where we need content to really help kind of, WD-40 the funnel. So those people are the core ones that are involved in the marketing team. I typically like to get involved in this stuff just because I love getting hands-on with some of these things. For some things, we'll bring in our CEO, who's like a big thinker and also appreciates thinking about this stuff. And then on the sales team, we'll bring in the head of sales. We'll usually bring in each individual salesperson who's on the front lines, because they can bring in the input. And also, if I don't have them convinced about the value, it's not going to go anywhere. The leads that come in, they'll say that they're trashy leads. They won't follow up with them. And even when they do have prospects that they need to nurture, they won't use it because they just don't believe in the product.
Who doesn't believe in the product?
If the sales team, and I look at product, and this is, I think I've been doing the marketing stuff too much. I look at product as a piece of content. In this case, right, I'm looking for content market fit or product market fit. And really my product is content. And I have to figure out, how do I market my content better? And I need the sales team to help me with that.
That's so interesting to think that actually you look at your job as a marketer as if you're managing a product, and each content item is a product that you need to optimize like products are optimized, and you need to make sure that it's successful and profitable. Now, the profitability of a product in your case is not how much money profit it brings, but how many effective leads, deals, and so on it brings, right? So
well, I think before you mentioned that every organization is shifting over to inbound marketing. Right, all that does is it puts the onus on each individual person or each individual company to provide value faster. Right, you can't wait for somebody to sign up to provide value. Like, as soon as that person hits your website, if you're selling to them, if you have a product page instead of a value page, you're dead in the water. So really that's where the content comes in. It's just very, very quick content. My favorite inbound channel that we have we have a platform that targets SMBs where we bring in a couple hundred signups every single day. And it's basically for our marketplace where companies can compare, book, and manage shipments. And my favorite inbound channel, it's basically content, but it's not actually. We took a lot of our internal data and we put together this very, very quick calculator, this estimator. Mm-hmm. Instead of signing up and generating a freight quote and comparing different companies, it's basically a back of the envelope scratch pad of here's, in general, how much it's going to cost to import a container from China to the US. Right. And it drives hundreds, thousands of people that visit every single day and drives a ton of people signing up. And it's a piece of content, but it's not a blog post. It's just a very, very easy calculator. It's kind of a product, right? So there's that product content market fit idea, but it's just driving value as soon as a person hits your website. And that's what I think you need to do.
Well, I'm sure some of our listeners might say to themselves, okay, Freightos, now they have so much data because they have so many clients, and then they can crunch up the numbers and bring some really valuable calculators and statistics. I wish I had that. Could you maybe share with us something that you did in the beginning stages when you were just starting out? You didn't have that many clients, so you didn't have that much data about comparing costs, shipments.
Yeah.
And needed to provide that much value still. So could you think of an example back then?
There's so much data out there. I mean, just off the top of my head, three very quick examples. Like every other sector in the world, everybody in their industry is petrified of Amazon, right? Of potential competition from Amazon. So, and Amazon has been a very, very strong player in the logistics space. If you take all their warehouses and put them together, it's larger than a quarter of Manhattan. Wow. Right. And you have to basically think like, okay, well, they're scared of Amazon. What kind of data can I get that I don't actually own to show why they should be scared or why they shouldn't be scared? So we just went to Amazon's career page and we scraped every single job position that had the word logistics or freight in it. And we put together a very, very in-depth data post around that says, here's what Amazon's looking at. Here's the skills that they specialize. Based on these skills, here's where we think they're going to be going in the next couple of years. Wow. Data-driven, drives a ton of value, and it's none of our data. It was so easy to do. It was very, very quick to scrape that. Another one, there's a annual climate change summit that the UN runs called COP. So every year they'll call it COP21, COP22. And we got, I think our first Wall Street Journal mention was when the researcher on our team basically went to Google Scholar, came up with 5 or 10 different academic articles about carbon emissions from ocean liners, did a meta survey, basically went through all of them and came up with an average score based off of the different, 5 or 6 different methodologies. We put it out in our regular email marketing list and we got a Wall Street Journal publication out of it. But again, not our data, but something that we were able to use. A third one is Google surveys, right? So you can run your own surveys on Google very, very simply. That costs a little bit more. You're still, probably talking about $1 to $3 per individual answer. But you can come up with 200-300 answers pretty quickly, and that's data. And data speaks, especially if it's credible data. So yeah, I definitely don't think that it's, you have to look for your own data. In many cases, it's not your own data that's the most valuable.
Maybe right now in the current situation, it's also easier to find people out there in the world that are sitting at home waiting to help the company gain some data.
Totally.
So giving some idea to people this is the time to do it, to do these things that are more intensive in terms of time spent on surveying.
Totally. And, what I would say in terms of the internal data is once you do have internal data, even if it's not particularly well fleshed out, but capitalize on that. So we started taking our data a while back already when we were just had a couple of hundred pricing points every single day. And we started putting together an index to say, here's what global container prices look like. And we started pushing that out as a product. And at this point, we averaged last quarter in Q1 2020, we averaged over 2 publications a day off of the data that we're putting out. That's just very, very low touch. We put out 1 blast a week and let people come to us. But that's productized. That's just content that is productized and really appeals to a very specific segment.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to ask you something that I saw in your notes that you sent me before, and I really need you to clarify this little topic. Okay, so I saw in your notes something that says, leverage no code to move fast. And I wanted to understand what are you referring to in our context?
Oh my God, yeah, this is I forgot that I wrote that, but this is actually my favorite topic in the world. So I'm a pretty firm believer that the real thing that you need beyond, if you're a good marketer, you know about content and you know about finding the right audience. But that always means that you're kind of stuck waiting for somebody else to do something, right? You're waiting for somebody to build a website. You're waiting for your WordPress designer to come up with a new template. So I've always felt that it's very important to be relatively unencumbered, right? To try to make yourself as independent as possible. And then frequently that's why marketers can run faster than product people, because we already have our WordPress template pages and we have all these plug and play products like Buffer or Hootsuite, Google Analytics, and it's very, relatively easy for us to measure things. The next generation of that is this entire ecosystem of tools that are out there, tools like Zapier or Glide to build your own apps or Airtable, where all you need to do is you need to be able to stitch together different types of products in order to push things out. So a really good example, things like Trustpilot, if you're running your own reviews. So I don't know how many marketers that do PPC know this, but if you have over 100 verified reviews from customers within a 12-month period, Google will start showing the average score in display advertising, right? So when you run PPC ads, if you have over 100 reviews, they'll start showing that, which means that it becomes really important to pick up more reviews. But it's really, really time consuming to reach out to every single individual user every time they leave reviews. And there's also a little bit of a risk because if you reach out to every single person, you're going to get some pretty crappy reviews there as well. So a no-code solution that we ended up using in order to make this happen was we basically started putting together an NPS survey. So you're in our platform, Intercom will pop up after you finish a shipment, Intercom will pop up a link that says, hey, leave an NPS review for us. Tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, how did we do? That'll open up a link in Typeform. Right? So Typeform will ask them to leave the results. They'll leave it. If they rated 8 or above, a link will show up there that says, hey, please leave us a review on Trustpilot. We'll use Zapier to pull in our Trustpilot code to make sure it's a verified and authenticated review. They'll go to Trustpilot, they'll leave the review, and without having to get any management involved, we're able to put together this very, very seamless flow where within just a couple of months, we were past that 100 bar, and suddenly we started to see a dip in acquisition costs because those stars are in the ad there. So being able to look at solutions like that and say, how can I stitch together things? We're starting to work on a shipment management app that is totally no code, using a tool called Glide Apps and Google Spreadsheets, being able to put things together that really drive value for the customer without needing to get any R&D involved. And I think going 3-4 years forward, this is the biggest career opportunity for marketers because it basically means you'll be able to put your products together by yourself. And then it's just a marketing game. Who can come up with a better brand, who can get in front of the right people, and who can make it happen better. Because most of the really large companies out there are not tech plays. Amazon is not really a tech play, it's just a marketplace. Airbnb, that's not proprietary technology. It's just building a platform, getting the right brand out there with some fairly standard technology behind it. So yeah, that's my rant.
Okay, so in the last 5 minutes, you've mentioned, I don't know, I think I heard at least 6 names of tools. And my next question to you is, of course, we all marketers want to move fast and not wait for R&D's support. But then, do you find yourself managing a lot of tools? And that always has its issues of data integrity, and it gets messy when you have a lot of tools and that you're experimenting with all of them, and there's not one person who's responsible just to get it all sorted out and cleaned out. How does that run in your company? Can you maybe share with us?
It gets very messy. I think it's important to remember that a lot of these no-code things are validation, right? That's not the be-all and end-all. If something works, you build it. Now, you get in this bad place where if it's working pretty well, you're going to deprioritize when you actually build it.
Right.
Because it's not breaking. And then you only wait for things to break and then things start to fall apart, as you just mentioned. And what we've basically done, I think, is when we have built things like that, kind of off the cuff, a lot of kind of CRM automations that we stitch together with 12 different zaps where they're running on Zapier, you find the right product owner for it in the marketing team, right? There needs to be one person who owns that. So our second hire on the marketplace side started as a sales and marketing operations role and evolved into being the head of the marketing for that entire business unit because she was all about the data and she was all about the data integrity and how do these things stitch together. And it became such a fundamental aspect to the company, and she was doing such a good job at it that it kind of evolved into her owning the entire business unit. But yeah, you need to finish that validation process, and you need to structure it. And sometimes no code will be what you keep. Sometimes you will continue to use no code for a very, very long time because the tools out there are that good.
Right. So your term no code means I'm using off the shelf tools. That's what it
yes.
means. Because
But I think the one difference is that
yeah.
it is tools that integrate with each other, right? It's not, you can have your Salesforce ecosystem or your Pardot ecosystem or Typeform or, whatever it is, being able to stitch everything together. I think like a really good example, and this is low code, not no code. But as I mentioned, we have this online index that tracks how freight prices change on a regular basis. And leading up to the Chinese New Year, prices always start to get very, very crazy. They fluctuate very, very rapidly, or during Corona, even. Things change very, very quickly. So I basically sat down and wrote a fairly small Python script. I'm by no means a programmer, and I'd be embarrassed to show it to any programmer, but a very quick script that would monitor that on a daily basis. And then using low-code tools like Zapier, every time it would change by over 7%, I would push an update directly into our CRM, and that would send out an email. And then we started marketing this new product to our companies, to our prospects. Hey, do you want to see if prices change by over 7%? Sign up here. And you would stitch together gravity forms with this Python and Zapier and pull all these little like technical solutions together that really just tick. So it's low code, it's no code, but it really is, I think at the end of the day, it's marketing independent.
So Eytan, wait a minute. You just mentioned that you dropped a few lines of Python code as you were putting this thing together. And now as a CMO of a company like Freightos, how important it is to be able to put together a few Python lines?
It's not. It might. I think it depends who you ask. If you ask the right person, they probably say that it hurts. Just because I like getting diverted into these small little side projects every once in a while. It's important for me, just as a CMO, to not lose touch with marketing. I think it's very easy to get lost in management. So, I mean, these Corona days right now, right? We've always focused a lot on education for our users. This kind of like pet project that I'm working on right now is taking one very large ebook that we put together, an 120-page ebook, and working together with a freelancer on Upwork to turn that into a Udemy course, right? Where we can make a little bit of revenue, but also educate users. And yeah, that might be something that I can pass off to somebody else, but it's really fun to get involved in these like little things that keep you kind of connected. And it keeps you sane, right? You don't want to be stuck in marketing meetings and management meetings all day. So
right.
I like to shift towards that. In terms of the coding thing, I think it's important. I think it's an important skill. And I don't think you need to know a lot, but I think spending 2 days a year doing Python courses on Udemy or Coursera is time very, very, very well spent.
That's really interesting to hear your perspective on it. I'm sure it also has to do with very personal tendencies.
Oh, but, yeah, 100%. I just love it.
So maybe can you, we're close to our time being up, but I still would like to tell me all of the different trades that you feel you need in your marketing team, regardless of who has it, that maybe are beyond the obvious that everybody can imagine. Of course you need somebody who can write. Of course you need somebody who knows how to put together research, but what can you frame all the trades?
So the absolute minimum that every single person needs to have is, do they ship, right? Can they get ship done? Are they actually going to go out there and are they going to own a project? Are you going to tell them, right? Do you have to say like, oh, put one foot in front of the other and keep on going until you hit X? Or can you say, here's the finish line, go? And then they'll come back to you and say, well, I need X, Y, and Z to do. And you say, great, go ahead and do it. But are they actually going to show ownership of something? And are they confident and independent enough to actually go and make it happen? Because the silent killer for any team, I don't think only marketing, is just pure ownership. And that's by far the number one skill I think that every single person needs.
Wow. Wait a second. Before you continue, I love that. I really believe in it too. Tell me, how do you test for that when you're interviewing a person?
So it's not a perfect art. I think what we'll tend to do in an interview, you kind of get a sense when you're talking to somebody, but when we bring people in for interviews, on the first interview after they finish it, we'll give them a task that is a little bit ambiguous, right? And the task will be more of a finish line. It'll be, here's a bunch of data, put together a report for publication that will get them interested in it. And they'll have to understand, like, oh yeah, I need to go to Excel and I need to like look up formulas and I need to put this together into a piece of content. And then we'll say, oh, and you also only have half an hour. And it could be really, really crappy if you do it. I don't care if you give me something that's really, really crappy, but show me that you know the processes and you know what you need to do. If I had more time, I would do X, Y, and Z. And that's a mindset that I really, really look for and really, really value. Maybe, if I was the CMO of Coca-Cola, it would be different. That would probably have some information specialists, right? We'd have some areas of expertise where we have one person who gets email, like nobody else gets email. But everybody by us needs to deliver. Almost everybody by us needs to be able to write a couple of words, right? Content is everything. Copy is everything. If you can't take your thoughts and put them into a piece of paper, then it's going to be a huge roadblock to being independent. So those are like skill sets that I just feel like are ubiquitous. Everybody needs to know them at least a little bit.
Cool. That was really valuable. Thank you. Is there any other thing that stands out before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, I like tech savvy. I think it's always helpful to have people that are a little bit tech savvy, or at the very least, people that are curious, right? The kind of people that if you give them a Lego box, right, they'll probably look at the front of the Lego box and try to build that. They're not going to pull out the instructions. I'd almost always rather somebody who breaks things once a month than somebody who never gets something built, right? Okay. Build 20 things, one of them will break. That's fine. I'll be okay with that. We'll deal.
Okay. Yeah. I hope you remember that when it breaks, right? a lot of managers say that, but
I think I do. I'm pretty sure. I mean, we screw up as a result, probably, of these processes. We screw up a fair amount. We'll email, the wrong lists every once in a while. We'll realize that. I mean, that calculator that I mentioned before for estimating freight prices, we built that kind of on the back of an envelope too, and we figured out about 2 weeks late that it was broken.
Wow.
And it just wasn't working at all. And when we figured it out because our signups on that page were spiking, went up a ton because people were trying to get price quotes from this estimator. It wasn't working, so they were signing up because they assumed that it was gated content. And then we had to think okay, do we actually fix this or not? But things break all the time. And I think, it's par for the course. Kind of need to accept it.
Wow. Well, Eytan, because I see our time is up, I think I've made so many notes. So I know I'm going to go back to this. Thank you so much. It's really very valuable. And would you like to tell people where to find you online before we...
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you so much. This was a really interesting conversation for me too. You can find me at buchman.co.il. That's buchman.co.il. And I also run a small marketing podcast that we'll have to do a crossover at some point. Yeah, called Marketers and Capes, and you could look that up too.
Great. Okay, so I'll link all of that in the show notes and hope to catch you soon on another topic.
Once we can get out of these rooms, right?
Yes. No, even before maybe, I don't know. We don't know how long we're going to be in this room. So
exactly.
We'll continue our thing regardless of where we sit.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the B2B Startup Growth Podcast, bringing you the latest wisdom on marketing, sales, growth hacking, and life as a startup leader. I'm your host, Shoham Eckhaus, and if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to cover soon, please reach out to me on b2bstartupgrowth.com and let me know.